Sonic's Quest Issue 2. Eggman contacts Snively, expecting his city to be rebuilt when he comes back, and then it says, "As you know," and wastes our time retelling something we already know. Why would he even say this if Snively's gotta know that already? The emeralds he has tucked out through tube are now being placed in a chainmail pattern within the ship's shell. They do naturally like to group with each other in chains, after all. He's using the rings not to power his Death Egg, but to make it invincible from external attack. I love this concept, rings being used to make things invulnerable, and not just people. It's a perfect logical extension of how they work in the games. Eggman says that he just needs a Chaos Emerald to get the Death Egg operational, and Snively points out that it already has too much weight. Yeah, because one measly Chaos Emerald would be the tipping point for it to have too much weight. We all know those things weigh 1,000 tons. All he has to do is throw a few things out and he'll have room for the emerald. But the reason he needs to get rid of all the debris is because it's making the Death Egg too heavy to launch the orbit. Meanwhile, in the excess trash compartment, Tails gets a really clever idea to disguise himself as a SWAT bot by using the broken remains of that robot Eggman wasted by killing it. So I like that. It's like karmic comeuppance for him making that mistake. He says he can jam himself into the husk of the robot and spy on Eggman that way, while working it like a puppet from the inside. I don't understand why just because the robot was broken, all of his internal components have been removed. You know, which has to have happened for Tails to be able to fit inside there and comfortably walk around. Tails decides to send the first SWAT bot he sees down with the excess trash, probably just because he hates SWAT bots and wants to get rid of as many as possible. And they all look the same, so it's not like they'll be missed and cause suspicion. I wonder how nobody's noticed that the top of Tails' disguise is cracked. You know, the same way as the robot Eggman broke. I guess he's too tall for Eggman to see the crack on the monitor. And since SWAT bots have been known to speak informally earlier in the comic, it makes sense that him not saying affirmative right away would not give himself away. But I have to wonder how people didn't recognize that a little kid's voice was coming from the robot. Did he know how to work the voice box in the husk too, where he can't see where it is? Sure is lucky that it wasn't broken by Eggman. After Eggman tells the disguised Tails to report to his bridge, it's revealed that Sonic was only pretending to be unconscious to trick the robot bird, and he immediately frees himself with Sonic Spin once he's brought to the Death Egg, making up for him being easily defeated last time. He magically keeps himself in the air using his super peel out. Wow, they've just been making up crazy uses for this thing. That's almost even worse than forgetting it exists and never using it again. He uses it so that he can attack the bird robot, and when he gets knocked out of the sky, he uses a badnik bounce that looks wrong because he's not in ball form to launch himself and propel himself along the side of the fallen trash. Of course, the minute Sonic thinks to try to contact Sally and let her know what's going on, something magically jams his communicator and the signal won't go through. Meanwhile, Nicole is for once not a Deus Ex Machina, as she logically can't figure out how to cure King Acorn. Good, that keeps attention. Rotor says that while Antoine and Bunny have just recovered from a slightly humorous situation where they got lost until Bunny took the map away from him, Tails' and Sonic's check-in reports are long overdue with no response on either of their communicators. For once, Sally actually reacts to her terrible situation realistically by breaking down crying in Rotor's arms, saying that the stress of everything they work for is coming apart is getting to her. That's another thing that's interesting about her character. She tries to look like she's 100% strong all the time, but even she has human moments and limits, where she has a sympathetic and relatable reaction to a ridiculous amount of stress. That can be the natural result of bottling up all your stress and worry until it just explodes out of you. And that's not the only time this is gonna happen. She's under a lot of pressure as the leader of the Freedom Fighters. So she's more like a broken ace, or a threat to becoming a broken ace if she overdoes it, rather than a pure ace. If she was indeed a Mary Sue, she would be a pure ace. She wouldn't feel any sort of pressure whatsoever and would just go along with everything. The Death Egg arrives at the floating island. About time. Seriously, it's a little late to start doing this now after the Knuckles Chaotic special. This is kinda hilarious. The comic immediately shows itself to be written with more care than the OVA by actually explaining why Knuckles can just fly. He gets up ahead of steam, jumps off the bank of the internal river, and glides, getting enough momentum to go up to it. By the beads of Aether? What kind of exclamation is that? He must have way too much respect for his great-grandfather. He gets shot down by a laser and caught by Mighty. Now that's a kind of embarrassing situation for him. Isn't he supposed to be like strong and badass? And the Chaotix all show up because they had seen that thing in the sky earlier and came running. Wait, Archimedes the Fire Ant is part of the Chaotix now? Well, it's good to see him back. That fire breath will come in handy. It's good to see the Chaotix getting involved. It'd be boring to just have Knuckles alone with no one to interact with. Two gigantic burrow bots get parachuted from the sky. Huh, Eggman used one of those really early on in the comic. Makes sense he wouldn't waste a perfectly good plan by only doing it once. They land in different places and go in two different directions. I guess Eggman really wasn't sending them down to fight Knuckles. Instead, they're there to find the two Chaos Emeralds found on the island by sensors. Makes sense he'd find two. Knuckles mentioned always carrying a spare when he had to replace an emerald he shattered, but that emerald was shattered. Unless he somehow glued it back together, or an emerald just magicked itself here to replace it, which is possible. After Knuckles tells the Chaotix to fight the two Burrobots, which are now really close together for some reason, even though they were sent to be far away from each other, we finally cut back to Sonic in a story called Sonic's Quest. This is pretty sad. You'd think the main character would get a miniseries to himself, but he is the main character, so I guess they thought he didn't need it. Sonic had been going through the Death Egg, leaving a trail of destroyed swap bots in his path, and finds the control room of Eggman's. Unfortunately, the exact problem I had with people disguising themselves as swap bots comes into full swing here, as Sonic mistakes Tails for a swap bot and tries to kill him. Good thing he didn't. That would have been a grisly end and made his decision to disguise himself pointless and stupid. Well, not entirely pointless, since he needed to do this to stay on the Death Egg for so long. Eggman orders the Death Egg to land on the floating island to drive it into the sea. So the people who theorize that the reason Angel Island was crashed into the ocean at the start of Sonic 3, despite the Master Emerald not being gone, was because the Death Egg pushed it down there? They were right. The Death Egg's downward thrusters are sending the island into the sea, giving it even further justification. I don't see what Eggman has to gain from this though. I guess he's counting on the sudden stop of the island when it hits the land or sea, sending everyone on it so high up that they get killed when they fall back down. But Knuckles can glide, remember, so he'd at least be fine. The Chaos Emerald in the Chaos Chamber just barely resists the weight being exerted on the island. Oh, Eggman actually plans to put the island under the sea and drown the people there. That would work a little better for impeding Knuckles. And Swapbots can work underwater, right? He'd have to send some kind of underwater robot out in order to find the emeralds after this. So isn't this just gonna inconvenience him in the end? Knuckles gives out an interesting tidbit that the emerald instinctively distributes its energy equally, but Robotnik's applying all the pressure at the south end, which is the reason why the island is still going down despite the emerald having infinite power. Except if it has that much power, every part of the island should still get a huge amount of power anyways, even if the south end is being pushed the most, so that shouldn't be a problem. For example, let's say every part of the island but the south end would have like 60 million jolts of energy, but the south part would have that too. That'd still be enough magic power to resist, wouldn't it? The floating island gets tilted towards the Death Egg and starts to submerge. And if this was enough to almost send the Chaotix over the edge of the island, I'm surprised this hasn't happened to the rest of the random civilians living here too. Why aren't their houses tumbling over? Frustratingly, the story ends just before I could see how Tails would get out of his perilous situation. I liked the situation the story had where the Death Egg was sending the island into the sea. It's a nice subversion of my expectations, as I thought it was just going to stay up in space, and then Sonic would stop it, and then I thought it would just land on the island, and they'd all stop it, going through the zones in the meantime. And I liked that Knuckles and the Chaotix pulled in to help, but I feel like the story put too little emphasis on Sonic for a story called Sonic's Quest. Although the story wouldn't have been nearly as interesting if it just focused on Sonic running through the Death Eggs, destroying Swapbots the entire time. So ultimately, the focus on other characters was for the best. Too bad the Chaotix and Archimedes didn't get to do anything other than fight some robots in one panel though. Hopefully that'll change in the final issue.